Okay, good morning. Um, okay, for today, I want to cover some things that I didn't have enough time to cover last week. As you maybe already noticed, I have published the first set of exercise, and the deadline is for next week on Sunday, right? It's for the let's see, it's for the 12th, I think. Is it? Yep. And it's covering some things we have done here in class, so that part should be fairly simple. And some other things that we have discussed, and you have said yes, we understand. So now we are going to see if you really understand. Um, what else? Yep. Yeah, I wanted to go through the compendium because I think we have it forgotten a bit. Okay, and just to show you more or less what we have covered. This chapter one from the book Hydrocarbon and Exploration and Production, we have covered that during the first lectures. Then this part onshore versus offshore, oil versus gas, a bit about estimating. We haven't done, that's going to be the next part, calculating the production profile. But here is more generalities about the relationship between the height of the plateau and the length of the plateau. Then we go more or less more formally into the process inside the company to perform the field development. All this process with decision gates and what more or less what kind of activities are done. So this part we have also covered. Let's see. Okay, then the content of PDO. What basic engineering tasks do you have in each part? That also we didn't cover, but I told you just to go and read. Economics, that was what we covered, I think was last class, right? Yep. And we are going to just cover very briefly through two things that I forgot to mention last class. So this we have also covered. So if you have any question, what I recommend, if you have any question from the class, something that was not clear, you try first to check on the video, the section where I was discussing it, to see if you get some understanding. If not, I strongly advise to go to this compendium and try to read the relevant section. And I think it's pretty well explained, and you hopefully that will solve your questions. They are not focused too much on the calculation part, but at least on the fundamentals. It's then this I have cataloged as supplementary. It's a bit interesting paper, but it covers a lot of things, and there are some things that you might not yet understand from the paper. But I think it's interesting to because it gives a very quick overview of the whole picture and what is important and what is not important and how each parameter affects each other. Every parameter affects each other. So I think it's very interesting, and if you have the patience, I recommend to go through it. And it's summarizing part of the discussion that we have had in class. It's like trying to merge all of these elements into one. You have decision trees, you have uncertainty, you have Monte Carlo. So it's basically, but how all of that falls into place in the overall workflow of the company. Yes. Then we have after that, so that we have covered in a way more or less volumetric estimation. That was the example that we covered on probabilistic estimation of total recoverable reserves. Let's see. Monte Carlo, we covered also that. And this we are going to have a very brief discussion today. I'm not sure if I will have time to cover this part, but maybe we can take it later during the semester. And yeah, then we come to the architecture, which is going to be a part of today. So that's what we have covered so far. Okay, so quite a lot, 1 month, and we have already covered more than half of the notes. Then the next thing was yeah, any questions from last class? No, from the exercise. I allowed to, because I initially was going to put 3 questions, okay, but I put one more, that was that you are forced in a way to go through the Visum PDO and check what is the content and try to build on that, based on that, the Gantt chart. I think that you learn how to make the Gantt chart. It's an add-on that it's not really, it's not a big engineering skill, but it's something that might help you in the future, okay, to create this Gantt chart, but also forces you to go and read through the report, okay, of the Visum. That I'm sure most of you read it already, so it should be no problem. But to those that haven't done it, is to force them to do it. So that's why I allowed to do it in groups of 2. Okay, this exercise. So, but it's possible to do it by one person only. But if you want, I to save time, I recommend to do it in 2. Yes. Any question? No? Okay, so we go for today's topic, and the first one was okay, that we have basically what we call petroleum fiscal systems. So we are going to cover first some things that were missing from last class, like the fiscal systems that we have in petroleum production. That very roughly, okay. There are some other courses that I told you where they covered that more in detail, but just to give you just a quick overview, that you are aware that there are 2 main fiscal systems. Then we are going to go to this example on decision trees, that you can use also decision trees to see if it's worth to do some investment or not. Not only to evaluate an option, but also to see if the investment that I'm going to make is going to pay off, basically. And that is very evident in appraisal. And then we're going to go to more on the architecture, to introduce you to the components of the production system and what kind of architectures do we have in the field, which type of architectures we have in the field. So that's more or less the menu for today. Okay, so first, petroleum. And this is brief. And just some note that in almost every country in the world, the owner of the mineral rights is the government, except USA. Okay, the only exception, or the most important exception, is the USA. And I guess those of you who take the course of Curtis Whitson, he sometimes dedicates a small section of some lectures to talk about how is the system in the US. But usually the owner of the mineral rights is the government. In the USA, the individuals are the owners, but they pay a tax to the state. Okay, and we have basically two in these petroleum fiscal systems. We have two main classifications. One of them, what we call royalty system, or concessionary system. Or another big branch that we call contractual systems. And there are many subdivisions in each, not so much on the royalty system, but more on the contractual systems. But there are two main subdivisions, that is PSC, production sharing contracts, and the other is service contracts. And as I told you, maybe there are some subdivisions, some different types, different variations, but I just want to give you the main structure. Okay? And in concessionary systems, some characteristics are you have a license to operate for a fixed period of time. Okay, in Norway is 30 years. Okay, and some countries that use this approach, just to give you some examples, are the UK, France, Norway, Russia, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Colombia, Argentina. Okay. So basically this consists on that the company pays royalty on the gross production, okay, certain percentage, and then after that pays a tax on the profit. Okay, they have the gross production, pays certain fee, certain percentage to the government, and then they are discounting, or they are removing all the costs, all the things that they have to pay, and after that they have some profit and they pay again tax on that profit. So we are, let me see if I have so let's see if we say, okay, so we have total oil and gas revenues. Then we say, again, we take out from here minus, these are the royalties. That is a percentage of the total income. And yeah, it depends from country to country. I don't know, I don't remember exactly the number in Norway, but I think it's 31%, but I don't remember exactly. So you take that away, and after that you have the net revenue. Okay. Then after that you deduct the OPEX, you deduct the depreciation, amortization, the interest, okay. Sometimes you have to pay bonuses to your shareholders, and that depends on the agreement that you have with the government. Some governments allow that you pay, if you remember on the previous class, if you remember, okay, you had some shareholders that they want to get some bonuses, and this part maybe is not allowed to put it in the expenses in this part of the calculation of the royalty. Some governments they allowed, some governments don't. But so I'm going to put it here bonus. Okay, and after that you get another step which is called taxable income. Okay. And based on that you calculate the tax. Okay, that can be a national tax, or you can have two levels. You can have state tax, and then you can have country tax, for example. Okay, but you have a tax that might be split in state and country, national tax. And after that you have finally your what is called the net income. That is after tax. Okay, very roughly, there are maybe some other things in between, but very roughly that's the process. You have your total revenues, pay royalties first, then you deduct. This is like what we call deductions, that you can argue with the government or negotiate what is going to be included. And if you see, it's relatively very important. OPEX, depreciation, things that you have to pay to keep kind of a healthy economy. And then after that you calculate the taxable income, and based on that you calculate the tax. And these numbers I'm not exactly sure, I owe them to you, but one of them is 50 something and one of them is 30 something in Norway. Somebody knows that can, no? Do you remember what else? No?
I don't.
Okay. Okay. Now on production and contractual systems, the main difference between these two is that in service contracts you just get the partner or the operator, the company gets their share in money. Okay, the government is the one in charge of selling the oil, of selling the resources, while here the company gets the share in production. Okay, but basically, just to make it simple, we will say they operate under the same approach. Okay, so here company receives a share of either the production or the revenue. Okay, it's like if the government was a partner that you want to split the cake with that partner. You don't do it based on the income. You don't do a tax on the income, but you already say from all the production I want a cake, 30%, 40%, 50%, depending on the agreement. Okay, and also there's, you have the deductions. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so here also in the production, in the contractual systems, the government can decide, has decision power on the management of the asset, so it can overrule the operating company. Okay, for example, the company wants to recover as quick as possible, so it starts producing very high rates, but the government thinks that that's going to impact negatively in the recovery factor of the reservoir. You're going to leave much more oil in the subsurface. So they decide, no, I have the power to say, please reduce the rates. We don't want to produce that much. And then they can do it in this scheme. Okay. Some countries, some examples. Malaysia, India, Nigeria, Angola, Trinidad, Algeria, Egypt, Yemen, Syria. Well, I'm not sure Syria now, but Mongolia and China. Okay, some examples. And the government, also important, the government receives their share in oil, okay, or in gas. Government. Do you still keep the same opinion that it's easy to read my handwriting? The first day you were very positive. No, perfect. You write very well. But now I think with time, with some classes, it's not so perfect, I guess. No? Okay, so here, let's see, it's a bit different. So let's to the right. Let's see if we have space. I don't think so, but let's see. So you have the total revenue, and you still have some kind of royalty. Okay, you still have some amount that you have to pay based on the total production. We call it royalty, or yeah, you have some kind of royalty. Then you have the revenue, the net revenue, and again you have so that's minus. Here you have minus the deductibles, that are basically the same as in the other case. Okay, deductibles, we call it also cost recovery. Okay, especially also to pay the loans, investment credits. Okay. And then we ended up in the profit production. Okay, the profit. And after we have this profit production, we just split depending on how much each partner is going to receive. Okay, for example, we have company 1, company 2, and the government. and the government is if they were another partner. So you have a share 3, okay, in some percentage, 30%, 40%, 50%, depending on the agreement. You have a share and you have another share. Okay, and then on top of that, let's say that we are talking about company 1. You have, this is what we call contractor oil, okay? And maybe you will have to pay again some taxes on this oil. Let's put it back up. Let's see if it fits. Wait. So that's the final profit. Okay, so two main differences: the way you make the calculation. So that's why I don't want to put the tax in your calculations. It's possible to do it. You can assume some values for all of that, but we go too much into the economics. I just want you to know that you have to calculate some economical indicators, and one of them is NPV, and we are making some simplifications, but really the big picture is much more complicated. Actually, you have a department inside the company that you go with the data of your project, and they are going to estimate for you all of these parameters, and they are going to tell you at the end that's what you're going to receive. Okay. But we are making kind of some simplified assumptions. I think I will paste later, let's put a space, I will paste later some example with numbers, so you see at the end how much is left, okay, based on certain number of dollars and how much you have left for both approaches. Okay, so let's put here just that space. So that discussion is finished, and I think it's something that you should know, how that we have different ways to calculate the tax and calculate how much is going to be the share of the government. And one of them is based on production, and one of them is based just on the revenue. You tax on the revenue. Then one thing is decision trees can be used to determine the value of new information, okay, or the value of new activities that will give me more information, and you can assess if it's worth to do that activity or not. The value of new information given by a specific activity. So let's just put that very quickly through one example. An example: drilling an appraisal well. So you have the decision at the beginning. Remember, what were the decision nodes? They are square, okay? And then you have two options: to drill appraisal well or not. Yes or no. And if yes, to make it simple, you might have, like I told you last class, you might have many other options. But let's say you have just here one chance node, you're still going to have the same chance, okay, to have, for example, P, let's say reserve, here they call it P, okay, P1, we say reserve P2 and P3, or let's maybe put it like this. Just wait. Okay. TRR1, TRR2, and TRR3. Let's not put it in squares, just, yeah. And each one of them has an associated probability, and that's in the exercise. That's going to be about part tricky about the exercise. You have to select yourselves what are these probabilities, how I'm going to group them. Okay, and I give you an extract from a book. I can give you the author later, but he says basically how to do it graphically, that you have to determine the range, and then from there you have to calculate the mode of that particular range. Okay, and he says you can do that analytically, but you can also do it graphically, and he says how to do it graphically. Okay, but you can decide whatever splitting you want, but in this case they calculated 0.33, 0.33, 0.33. So all of them have the same chance. And at the end, after that, so it might be you drill the well, and then you have still the same options, but then you have two options for each one of them. You have the decision if to develop, yes or no. Develop, yes or no. Develop, yes or no. Okay. And as I told you, we have to calculate the, how do we call the value, the expected value, okay, of each one of these branches. You say, what happens if I do appraisal? I decide, so that's some cost that I have to deduct from my economy. Then I come here, each one of them will have a different value, and I can decide if to develop or not. So in the example, they had certain NPV. Okay, we can use it also. Okay, that's in $1,000,000. Okay, we can do it also. We use the how is it, the how did we call it last class? Was the expected value? No. Last class I confused these two terms, and now I again confusing them. Expected monetary value is the expected value of a certain branch. Okay, when you weight probability together with the NPV, together with the cost. That's E and B, expected monetary value of the branch. But then there was another one that was the, I don't remember. Okay, NPV. So we say if we decide we are going to have a loss because the development is not profitable. If we decide not to develop, okay, we're going to have, okay, 0 plus 6, 0, 66, and 0. Okay. The thing is that when I'm making this appraisal, I'm determining a bit better how much the formation, how much this volume can produce. Okay, I'm appraising, for example, let's say that you are testing the permeability of your formation, and you can have a better estimate how much your reservoir can deliver. So this value, you can have a better approximation, because better approximation of NPV of the NPV, because I have a better idea how much the formation can produce. Okay, let's say I make the permeability. I have a better idea how much it is, and I know how much I can produce. Okay, so this number is more. It's more. This appraisal gives me a better estimation of the NPV. Now, if I decide not to appraise, I have the same issue. Okay, so let's copy exactly the same tree, and I give you some time. I haven't done the appraisal in this case. I assume doesn't give any additional information. I didn't do the appraisal to know the extension of the reservoir. So really the probability, they will remain the same. What is going to change is how much I can produce, and how much I can produce that's going to affect, for example, my processing facilities. Okay, the size of my processing facilities. If I don't do it, I might say, okay, for this amount you need, for example, minus 40. Okay, you need a facility that is much bigger than what really you really need. Okay. 6, 0, and 6 and 40 and 0. So you can compute the ENV of this branch, and you can compute the ENV of this branch. Okay, so let's put that calculation on the side. So ENV of this branch, of course, I have managed to get a better value for NPV. Okay, so here this branch will cost, for example, I think the example is 24. Okay, 24 of the branch $1 million, and the ENV for this branch is a 2, I think. Yeah. And this allows me to estimate. So the difference, if you say the difference is just the decision if to do appraisal or not. Okay, so if my well, for example, costs more than the difference, more than 22 million, then it's not worth to make the appraisal. Okay, because that's the difference I'm going to get by doing the appraisal. So let's put that here. Value of is the value, the ENV with appraisal minus the ENV without. And that gives me 20, 22. Okay. So that difference in the tree, that's kind of an economical indicator that we assign to that particular branch. And we can compare two branches and say, well, the difference is really what I'm getting extra by drilling this appraisal well. Okay, then I can say if my well, for example, costs 50 million, it's not worth to make the appraisal. I'm going to spend much more money than just the gain I will have by doing the appraisal. Okay, if my well costs 5 million, then I can say, okay, let's drill it, because the change or the difference is much bigger than the cost of the actual action. Okay. Okay, we are not going to go too much into this. This is this we say we call it generally value, determining the value of information. Okay. And you have also some other indicators, some other methods, but just to make you aware that you can also use trees not only to evaluate decisions or discrete options, but also you can compare two things in the tree and then see if it's worth to do that or not. Okay. Do we take a break? Yeah, 15 minutes? Okay. I added some comments on this tree, but there is something that I don't like, is to have the decision of to develop or not after this chance node. This is something that happens when you already took the decision. If you take the decision, you have the chance that you have high reserves, medium reserves, and low reserves. And really it gives you the same, exactly the same result. But first, it's not kind of, it doesn't have it's not logical in the time sense. Okay, that's not the sequence of events, and also looks a bit messier. So what I will suggest, and it's not going to change at all any of the, is just to put it before, and I think in the book they have it like that. So we remove the 0 from here, and you have just the chance. You appraise, and then you get more information, and then you have another decision node that says if you want to develop. Okay, yes or no. Okay, and this is the one that has 0 value. Okay, but it's going to give you exactly the same. The estimated value of the branch is just the probability times the value of that particular option. Okay, exactly the same for the other case. But I think it's less messier, and it keeps the logical sequence in time of events. Let's put it here. Sorry if I messed up with your notes. Was it? Yes. Okay. So and I put here another comment that the appraisal affects how much is the productivity of the formation. That affects how much wells I have to use, and that affects also the size of the processing facilities. So here initially I was estimating a value much higher, for example, than what I really need. Here is more or less the same value, and here I was estimating also much bigger, something much smaller than what I really need. Okay, but this is just an example with fictitious numbers, but yeah, let's see if maybe in the future we do one with real numbers. I'm not sure if we will have time. Okay, so let's go to another topic, if that's clear, more or less. We are going to go to another topic, which is the layout of hydrocarbon production systems. And truly we have two offshore. Okay, this is focusing offshore Norway. And we have two main, or we can make a rough splitting between two main systems, where we have dry Christmas trees and wet Christmas trees. Okay, this usually we call subsea wells, and we say platform wells. Okay, and we can have here the option dry Christmas trees. You always can have plus subsea wells. Okay, usually you have a combination of these two. When you have a system, when you have a platform where you have wells in the platform, you usually also have subsea wells. Okay, but when you have completely subsea systems, you usually don't have dry. And let's see if that gets clearer, if with an image. Okay, here I'm drilling all the wells. These are done. Wells are drilled in a similar way. similar to onshore. The same way, but you have, in that case, you have the drilling rig is on top of the platform. The drilling tower is on top of the platform, and you perform the drilling like if you were on land, okay, but from the platform. And this approach, all the Christmas trees of the wells are in the platform, and you reach every location where you want to produce from the platform using some kind of deviated well. Okay, so here wells are drilled similar to onshore. Wells are deviated and sometimes highly deviated. Okay, and you have to be careful for intersecting well path. Okay, because they are drilled, really the distance between them is not much. So you have, imagine you have 5 meters and then you're drilling, and really this doesn't go straight down, okay, the drilling string, but it has some variation depending on the resistance of the rock. So what happens if that variation at some point just enters into the path of another wellbore? So that's something that you have to care, and let's put up the image of how it looks like on the platform. I think it's in the compendium. Okay, that's how it looks like. Okay, and it's really very similar to an onshore, but the thing is that all the wells are very close, very packed in the same. So this is what we call a well bay. Okay, it's an area where I have all of my Christmas trees located in the same place, and I have on top of that, usually I have the drilling tower that can move and can be on top of each well depending on which one I'm working on. Okay, then we have the other approach, which is wet Christmas trees, and that really is something that, in a way, Norway it's a pioneer. And if let's use, I think if there is a figure of a platform. Okay, and in that case, the wellheads are subsea, are wet. Okay, you drill them from, usually from a vessel, from a drilling vessel. So let's see, drilling is done with a drilling vessel. Okay, can be usually a ship, okay, just like with a boat shape, or with a semi-sub ship, or a semi-sub. Okay. The wells, they can be much more vertical. Okay, the wells are not so deviated. Okay, and we will see that that's not exactly correct all the time. If you have one well, you can of course put it exactly on top of the formation, But usually what we try to do is we try to group these wells to be more or less in the same place. Okay, and then we need to put them deviated. Are not so deviated if they are not grouped in clusters. Okay, if they are grouped in clusters, and we will see that just in a moment, they are going to be, they are drilled very close to each other, maybe 20 meters, and then they have to have some deviation to reach different parts of the formation. Yeah. But as I told you, you can have in this system, you can have, for example, one well that is satellite. Okay, satellite subsea well is producing from some other formation, and then you can tie in the production to that particular platform. Okay. In this system, you cannot really have dry when you don't have when you have only wet trees. You cannot have dry trees. Okay. Yes, that clear, more or less. Okay, so now let's go to okay, so that's the figure I was looking for. Maybe that's better instead of this. Okay. 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 Let's talk a bit about just before. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We have one arrangement where we have wet and dry trees. Okay, but let's talk a bit about the production manifold. And the production manifold, we are going to make one example with, okay, the production manifold, basically you have three functions. Okay, you have commingle, okay, or compound or merge production from different sources, merge production from different sources. Okay. Also, something that is important is that we want to test the well. Okay, remember we want to know how much each well is producing, and there are many reasons for that, but one of the things could be because the ownership of different reservoirs or of different sections of the reservoir is changing. Okay, so you want to know the share of each partner, so you want to be able to test the well. Okay, and testing the well has different purposes, but you can use it for determine production shares. Okay, and that's allocation, and that's important when we have, for example, a multi-reservoir field, or we have some sections of the reservoir that have different ownership, so we want to determine how much belongs to each company. Then you want to test the productivity of the well, or calculate or estimate and we will see for us in this course that that particular point is very important. We want to find how much the well can produce if we apply certain pressure to the sand phase. And we will see later, this is basically try to find the IPR, okay, the inflow performance. Those of you who took production wells, performance relationship. And that's a very useful or set of numbers, and with that we can compare what's happening with our well with time. Okay, if there is a big reduction of rate, we can say, for example, there is something wrong happening in the reservoir. Okay, for example, collapsing of the formation, some gravel pack got plugged. Okay, you can detect. That helps to predict production, and that helps also to troubleshoot, to do troubleshooting. Okay, and another thing that we want to use the well for is to generate data to tune reservoir models. Okay. Remember that reservoir models is the only element in the whole system that is going to project how much we're going to get from that field. And that for all kind of planning, for strategic planning, when I'm going to stop producing, how much money I'm going to get, what is going to be my expected recovery factor, that's extremely important. So that's why then there are some other things like to sample the fluids. Okay, there are other secondary issues, but so that's called the generate data to tune. Okay, I wrote it incorrectly. To tune reservoir model, and this is that process is called history meshing, and improve the predictions. Okay. And to sample the fluids, that's to determine fluid behavior. Okay, we want to know, for example, if the well is producing too much water, if the well is producing too much gas. There's some that we need with fluid. We need the fluid model. We need it for many things in our petroleum engineering calculations. Okay, and the other thing is that to route okay, the well production to a particular separator. Okay, and let's see now, just that I gave you the functionality, see you how the manifold looks like. Okay, so let's say we have two separators. Okay, these are called, on the processing part we're going to make a detailed discussion later, but let's say we have, that's a HP, high pressure separator, okay, or also called the first stage separator. Okay, and in this separator we have usually a level controller that is connected to this valve of the liquid. That's the oil coming out, oil plus water, for example, and here you have gas. And you have also a pressure controller that goes to a valve on the gas line. So these controllers, they are making sure that all the time you are at a constant pressure and at a constant level. Okay, we're going to talk more in detail about it, but and sometimes you have exactly the same. Okay, you have two, because one separator might not be enough to process all the fluid. Okay, so you have two first stage separators. Or the test separator. Okay, the separator where we only are testing how much the well is producing. Okay, And let's say now we have one well. Okay. So how many valves is we are going to put the well, like if it's a line, okay? How many valves do we have in the well? Anybody remembers? No? So first we have, so let's say that this is the wellhead, okay? Below the wellhead you have the first valve that is in the, and this line represents the tubing, okay? The conduit, the pipe that is taking the fluid from the formation up to the surface, okay? This, if we are saying that is the wellhead can be located in the, if we are talking about a dry wellhead, that will be up in the platform. And if you're talking about a subsea well, that would be the seabed. Okay, so this can be the seabed or can be the platform deck. Okay, so petroleum engineers, what other things we have? Okay, we have a master valve. Okay, we have a wing valve. So the master valve is the one, and we have one valve below, which is the subsurface safety valve. Okay, SSSV. Okay. The master valve, which is the main, if I'm going to close the well, that's the one that I'm going to use. If I'm going to shut in the well, that's the one that I'm going to use. So that's the main, and that valve is, this valve is on and off. Okay, this valve is also on and off. Then I have the wing valve, which is also on and off. On top of that, on the same line, I have another valve which is called the swap valve, and this valve is the one that I use for intervention. Okay, when I want to do intervention in the well, I need to access, I need to pull out the tubing, I need to do some cleaning, I need to stimulate the formation, I need to create fracking. So that's the valve that I use to access intervention, for well access. Okay, and really the wing valve is, I'm not allowed to have any connection other than the master valve to the tubing, okay, to the wellbore. So any connection below the master valve I'm not allowed to have. So that's why I have the wing valve. If I want to measure wellhead pressure, if PWH, okay, wellhead pressure, is measured, I can close the wing valve and I can leave the master valve open. Okay, so maybe let's pull that down. I think we are going to repeat the drawing for Then what do we have next? After the wing valve, we have the main control valve. That valve is something that I'm changing all the time, up and down. I'm closing and opening, and that's what we call the choke. Okay, we make it a symbol like this, and an arrow indicating that's a variable. So let's maybe pull it up. That's a choke, and that's an adjustable. And then we go to the manifold. Okay, then here goes to the manifold. So let's draw the wells, very simplified, now that I put all the components. So you have the master valve, you have the wing valve, the swap valve, okay, and then you have the choke, and then you have a non-return valve, okay, a check valve. Okay, some valve that if we make it in a very simplified scheme, if the fluid goes in this direction, then the ball is going to be all the time open, pressing through the seat. But if the flow tries to go in the opposite direction, the ball is going to close. Okay, so that's one direction, or called check valve. Norwegian Tilslake-ventil, is it? Tilbake. How? Tilbake-slagsventil. Okay, we learn Tilbake-slagsventil. Yes? Okay. Now we come and we have to have in the production manifold, okay, so let's put that below here. We have to have that valve, okay, and we have to have two headers, okay, one that is the, okay, let's call it header, okay, just a piece of pipe where I can send production to this header and it will end up, then there is a pipe, okay, this is a short pipe section. We're going to see right away a drawing, but it's for you to understand very simplified what we do in a production manifold. So you have a small pipe, short pipe section, okay, then we have the main transportation pipe. Okay, if we are talking about subsea, this length is going to be maybe 10, 8, 5, 20 kilometers. If we are talking that we are on the platform, that pipe is going to be very short. It's going to be only 20 meters, only 50 meters. Yeah, more or less. Okay, and then the well can produce either to that header or to another header. Okay, this we call it, if the two of them are production, both of them are production header. If one of them is the test and one of them is the production, then we call this test header. Okay, then we have the main transportation pipe, and to join that we have another set of valves that we call routing valves. Okay, in this transportation pipe, let's put here the comment in a platform. This is might be between 5 and 20 meters, okay, or 50 meters. And subsea, it can be, yeah, anything between maybe 5 kilometer to Snow White has 160 kilometers, okay, the Tamar field. So that distance can really be relatively important. So if you see, if you want to, for example, you want to send the well just to production, okay, you put all wells, and here you will have also other wells, okay, you will have, that's well 1, but then we can paint also, we can try to paint well 2. Let's make space for well 2. Okay. Let's see if we can copy. Okay. That we call well 2. Okay, and it also has to have a set of valves to go to one header or to go to the other header. Okay, so let's say that that separator is a test, and I just want to know how much well 1 is producing. So initially well 1 and 2 are producing to the main production line, to the main production separation facilities, but then I want to test well 1. So I close that valve, open this valve, and now I reroute the production to the test header. Okay, and I'm able to measure. Here I have some measuring M, okay, some meter that I can measure how much oil and gas is coming from that particular well. Okay? Yes? Okay, now let's make it, more complex. Okay, if we make it let's talk a bit about the valves. Okay, so master valve, wing valve, routing valve, they are usually gate valves. Okay, where you have a seat okay, then you have a moving part, okay, that's a part that is moving up and down. Sorry. Okay, so when the is a gate valve. Okay, so when I have the gate valve in the fully open position, I really have no constraints. The opening is almost the same as the inlet pipe and the outlet pipe. Here I did a mistake. Okay, but when I close it, and this should be a bit longer. Okay, made a mistake here. I can just make it longer. Okay, when I pull it up, I'm pulling this part up or pulling it down, and I'm blocking I'm no longer aligning the hole with the flow, okay, with the pipe, and I'm blocking and I'm closing it. And they cannot be operated in half position. Okay, they have to be either fully open or fully closed, and they are usually gate valve. I will try to find you a better sketch of a gate valve. Okay, but basically we have one moving part with an opening, and then if we present exactly the opening in front of the channel, then we have full flow, unrestricted flow. And then if we pull it up, pull it down, then so the big part should be the upper part. Then we obstruct the flow. Okay. Then we have the choke. How the choke looks like. Usually the choke is a control valve. Okay, adjustable valve. Okay, and we have different types. We have needle choke. We have cage and plug, or it's called cage choke. I think we have a picture of that in the compendium. Okay, we can take that picture. Looks nice. Okay, So in this case, the fluid goes on the side and then goes through that's what they call the cage of the choke. It's a cylinder that has a bunch of openings, a bunch of holes, and then it enters and they it's like impinge on each other. All the streams of fluid that go from all of these holes, they impinge in the center and then they go down and they exit the choke. Okay, and first this restriction, these very small holes, they cause a very big pressure drop. Okay, and then the impingement, they lose a lot of energy by this impingement, and then the fluid goes down, and with that they can regulate, taking up and down, how many holes they are exposed to the flow. They can regulate the delta P. Okay, that clear? Yeah. The needle choke, I don't have a nice picture here, but the principle is that you have, okay, the fluid enters through the side, okay, and enters into this channel, and when I lower this needle, I'm reducing the flow path. Okay, I'm making it the channel very, very small. I'll increase the friction losses and I increase the delta P. Okay, so this is the needle choke. The thing about this type of chokes is that they are very, very prone to erosion. Okay, due to high velocities. Okay, if I have high velocities, they tend to create friction on the material, and at the end they wear the material. In this case, cage chokes, you also have friction through the holes, but a big part is dissipated due to impingement of the streams. They impinge on each other. They don't impinge on the walls. So that creates significantly less erosion. Okay, unless you have sand, which is another issue. Okay, just to give you an overview of the valves, and also the before we take the break, which is okay. Okay, the subsurface safety valve, okay, which is a valve that has to be energized. This valve, that's the subsurface. Is energized, is always energized with a hydraulic line. Okay, so if you see on the drawing, basically it's you have a hydraulic line that is all the time pressurizing this particular part. Okay, and this part is a sleeve that is just covering a flapper. Okay, so here you have a flapper. Okay, the flapper is open, but then it can at any moment come and close the stream. Okay, we have one here in the basement, so I will try to, but there it's stored in some place. So we have to tell the technicians to pull it out, and we can watch and see how it works. But basically, when this is all the time, the hydraulic line is all the time on, then this sleeve, the green sleeve, is all the time covering the valve and not allowing it to flip, to close. Okay, but if something happens in the surface, let's say you have a fire, or you have an accident, or you have a loss of power, this line won't have power anymore. You won't have fluid at high pressure keeping the valve open, and that's going to cause that the spring is going to push it up. Okay, the sleeve, so that's a sleeve, and then the flapper can go and close almost in a similar fashion as a check valve, and that's because of safety. And you have the subsurface safety valve is usually 100 meters or more or less, okay, below the Christmas tree. And it's just an extra safety barrier that we have. If something happens in the surface, you don't get this pressure, high pressure, to keep it open. It's going just to close. Okay, and that came, maybe we have some shocking pictures, that came from the Gulf War in Kuwait. or partly, okay, where they had all of these wells, they had it without this subsurface safety valve. Let me put it maybe bigger. Okay, and when they came and bombed the field, they just hit the Christmas trees. They broke the only barrier that was blocking the fluid from going out, and then they just had wells flowing fire for for so many days, and was then difficult to control them. So they want to be sure if something happens to the wellhead, if something happens to the surface, this valve is going to close and keep a barrier between the formation and the surface. Yeah, and they won't be flowing and burning for a long time. So that's in the Gulf War. I think it was some in the 1990s. Okay, and those are wells in Kuwait, bombed. Okay? And they really didn't have this safety system. Okay, so now we have seen more or less the valves that we have. Okay, very simple gate valve, a big opening. We have the subsurface safety valve, something that you will see it creates a lot of issues, because in the life of the field you can create, it has a lot of small cavities. Okay, and in all of these cavities you can have the growth of scale, you can have erosion, you can have sand accumulation, and then it might happen that if the valve closes, it doesn't want to open later, or if it's open, it doesn't want to close. Okay, so this particular equipment causes a lot of issues in operation, but is something necessary that you need to have for safety, and you have to make sure that it's operating properly all the time. But it has a lot of issues, especially with scale, sand. Okay, it's locked either in the open or closed position. Okay. And the choke, just to show you how it looks like, the choke, usually if you are in the field, you don't really have to have an adjustable choke. Okay, that we use very much offshore. Okay, but in onshore fields, a beam choke is often used. Okay, so let's see how do we make place here. We can take this part down. Okay, no, in onshore fields, a beam choke is often used to control the production. But the beam chokes are not adjustable. Okay, so the beam choke is just a piece of cartridge, okay, that you put in the, and you fix it in place. Okay, maybe it has an opening on this side, okay, and has some screws that fix it in place from this side. Okay, and depending on if the well is initially has a lot of energy, can produce much more than what you want, you use a very small opening. Okay, but then with time you go and some operator goes and close the well, pull it out, okay, and change the orifice, then put it in a smaller size, smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's what's going to happen with time. You use always a smaller, bigger and bigger orifice. Okay, bigger and bigger choke, and it's just a cartridge. Okay, that is replaced with time. Okay, do we take a break now? 15 minutes? and we come back and look again at the manifold. We got a bit distracted with the valves. Um, okay, so I just wanted to show you in my YouTube channel there is a video. Let me just put this already on. Of a subsurface safety valve. Okay, and you can see the piston up there is pushing the spring against the spring, and I'm using this hand pump, which in reality will be provided by the platform. And there is a sleeve that is covering this flapper. Okay. So that's when it's open for you open the valve for the first time. And then from time on, it's going to stay like that all the time. And if there is a problem with the flapper, that loses hydraulic power. Wait. Okay, that's the valve we have here, and maybe one day we will go. But you see the piston that has hydraulic fluid inside takes it from the surface, is pushing this shoulder that is at its time moving the sleeve, and it's also fighting, it's also competing against that spring, and that spring is being compressed. So really it's the spring that you accumulate energy, and the spring is what is going to open the sleeve and allow the flapper to go and close. Okay, you see the flapper here, it has a hinge below that you cannot see, and when that part okay, there is no loss of hydraulic power, the spring starts to push up, move the sleeve up. Okay, that happens very quickly. Okay, move the sleeve up, and then the flapper just closes. Okay, we will take a trip to the lab in the future. Okay, so go back to, so let's, now that that's on the production manifold is relatively clear, let's go a bit about the subsea considerations or the layout of subsea systems. Okay, because you see really, and we have some, let me maybe find some pictures. Okay. Okay. Production manifold. For platform wells or onshore wells. And we have here a picture from an onshore well. Okay, you see the two headers. Okay, and you can see a very I'm having the power fluid on the back and all the scrap, all the wax, all my production fluids, they are all in the front. Okay, and the receiver is exactly the same system. Okay, initially I'm flushing the fluid on this direction through this loop. Once the pig is inside, I'm going to close this valve, and open this valve, and then bypass the pigging receiver. So that's what I call a pigging receiver, and the other one was a pig launcher. Yes? And you have to have some sequence in the valves, but we are not going to go too much in detail. I think that's enough. Okay, I'm going to put later the figure of the okay, here we are missing the picture of the pig receiver and pig launcher. So pig, it's pigging loop or performing pigging, it's a big issue subsea, okay, for subsea wells. And you have to, if your system you think you need to perform pigging, you have to have two lines, okay? But there are different ways to do that, okay? So now we can go to these nice pictures that I put before. Okay, so that's how the wax plugs, and the guy is, very happy. I think if he charged some rights for the use of that picture, he will be already rich, because that picture they are using it for everything. Okay. Okay, so you can have in that case one well. If you don't need to execute any pigging and the distance is very short, you can send it directly to the platform, and you put the manifold in the platform to route to test separator A or B. This is another approach, but in this case the wells, they are outside the template. Okay, and here you have the manifold. So you have, this is what they call the Christmas tree, okay, or the well template, and you have a manifold template. Okay, and the manifold, and that's, for example, typical in offshore Angola, offshore Congo. That's an arrangement they use very much. But you still see you have the two lines, okay, and the lines, the pig, they have to be the same size, okay, because the pig has to be able to go through both of them without any problem. So the two of them has to be the same size, and here you have the loop, the pigging loop, okay. And here you see they want to use the same arrangement. For example, they want to produce all of these wells through these two lines, and they also want to have pig. When they pick one, they also pick the other at the same time. Okay? So that arrangement is called daisy chain. And you have then that the wells can be inside the template. That's what we use in the North Sea. Okay? Now let's take the other picture down. That picture. And the pig, if you see, doesn't go all the way inside the wells, okay? The pig stays in the production headers. So in the, really you don't feel, or because the temperature is high close to the wells, you don't usually have to do pigging in the well itself, okay? Because the temperature is high enough. And if you see this particular case, exactly the same thing, okay? You have 4 wheels outside. We're going to see now a 3D picture going to a manifold and 2 lines. So here you can execute pigging. Here you can also do pigging, but here you cannot do pigging. Okay. Okay, so now let's see this. So that's how the template looks like for and it's actually a very huge structure. Okay, that's what we call a template plate, and it can be wellhead, well plus manifold. It can be also just for the manifold. You can use that also for if you have some separation, subsea separation equipment. If you have subsea boosting. Okay. You can put almost everything inside. But in this particular case, this is for wells. Okay, and that's the arrangement, the other arrangement that I told you when wells are not wells and manifold are not in the same template. Okay, so you have every well. Okay, all of them. These 6, they go to a, and here is where you have this arrangement. You have 2 valves for each well, and you have 2 lines that go through it. And if you execute pigging, probably you're going to go through one line and come back from the other line. But it's exactly the same. The thing is that the manifold is outside. And part of the reason is because it's easier to drill. Okay, you have more space. In this case, you can have more space between the wells. When you are drilling in the manifold, in the template, you will have the space between them is really very, very close. So there is really room for, if you, for example, knock an existing well that is already there, you knock it, you can create some damage. So you have to be more careful in the drilling operations. And in this case also, you are not, in the other one you have just 4 slots. Okay, and in the North Sea usually we use 3 and have 1 for backup. Okay, if one of the wells is screwed up. But here we can connect as many as we want. Okay, the main limitation is the capacity of the manifold. How many entries can I have in the manifold? Okay, so those are some of the advantages and disadvantages. So in cluster, yeah, we can. So you have one more picture. Okay, that part is what we call these connections between templates, okay, or between well and manifold is called jumper. Okay, when you hear that they talk about jumper, the jumper is that particular piece of pipe, is a rigid piece of pipe. Okay, and they have you can have different types of connectors. Okay, so that's 2 jumpers. Okay, and horizontal, remember that you have the gravity, you're going a bit against the gravity. You have a lot of friction in the connector. So it's usually, that is used for shallow, relatively shallow to not so deep. But when you go for higher depth, they use vertical connector. That the gravity is helping to make the matchup of the joint. Okay, let's see what else do we have. Okay, so let's make this, this question. How do we test subsea systems subsea and some offshore systems. Where I don't have a test, where I don't have two lines, okay, that go to test and production separator. Like if we put it very simple, we have one well and then we have a valve and we have just one line, okay, and then we have another well, one valve and one line. Okay, it might be, that's, let's say this case might be a field called Snovit. How is the name in English? Snow White. Okay, that this distance from here to there, it's from here to the separator, it's 160 kilometers. So really, to put an extra line just to be able to do pigging is not worth the investment if I don't need it, okay, because it's just too long. So in that case, I can do two things, okay. I can have, if I need, and actually they have a subsea pig launcher, okay, and I have to come with a vessel, with an intervention vessel. I have to place the pig and I have to power the pig all the way from, that's in offshore Hammerfest, all the way to my processing facilities. Okay, another thing that I have in these systems is that I can place a multi-phase meter in the well. Okay, and a multi-phase meter is just a meter that records rates of, or that measures rates of oil, gas and water, but when all of them are flowing in the same pipe, and that's very challenging. That's very challenging a situation, measuring oil, gas and water rates while flowing simultaneously. Okay, if you see the previous picture that we had of the test separator, we are measuring at the discharge of the liquid and at the discharge of the gas. So these meters, they can be just standard single phase meters. Okay, a meter for gas or a meter for liquid. But when we go and we put it in the well stream, because we want really to save that additional loop, okay, that additional pipe, then this meter has to be able to measure the three phases and when all of them are flowing simultaneously. And that's not really, there is not much trust in these meters. It has matured over the years, but there is not much trust. They need to be calibrated, and you need to show that they compare them first with just a single phase meter, okay, to see and how do they. So that's one option, to place multi-phase meters in each well. On each well. Okay. Then another thing is to place a subsea pig launcher. Okay. Or you can also use a multi-phase meter for a group of wells. Okay, because usually these multi-phase meters, they are very expensive. Okay, and if the wells, they are not really huge producers, I don't want to make that investment for every well. It can add up a few millions more just to have this multi-phase meter in every well. Okay, so what I do is I again put a manifold. Okay, use a manifold to route the well production through the multi-phase meter. Okay, that's how we abbreviate it, multi-phase meter. So let's say all of that, if the wells are satellite, okay, they are not in the cluster. Here we have all of our wells and they are joined by jumpers to a main template. So here we have the template. Okay. And the template has all of these jumpers that connect the wells to the template. Inside you have the same manifold that we are used to, okay, the manifold with a test and a test header and a production header. But now in this case, they don't go to two separate lines. At the end, they're going to be merged. I just want to be able to pass. I want to test well 1. I want to be able to pass it through here, test the rate, and then join it back with the main production line. Okay. Of course, here I need some more things. Okay, I need to have Tilbake Schlagsventil. Okay, that's a long word, huh? Almost like German. Okay. And I need to have another routing valve here. Okay, that clear? Yes. Now to use one more minute of your time, when we are in onshore operations, we have sometimes that arrangement, especially if the distance is very long from here to the processing facilities. But what we do, don't use a multi-phase meter, but we use a test separator, a portable test separator. That we can ask service to a Schlumberger, Halliburton, someone. They have the slot here. They just have the connectors. They say, please go and test how much I'm producing for well 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they come, they place the test separator, they separate, measure all the rates, and they combine them together and then send it to the production line. Okay? I'm going to bring some pictures next class, but they do it, maybe the separator stays for a few days, they measure every well, and then they close, take the separator out, and pull it in another cluster of wells. Yes? Okay, any question? No? No questions? I'm beginning to be concerned that there are no questions in class. Either I'm too good explaining or I'm too bad explaining. Okay? Yeah, so let's see you next Thursday.